They say horses don't have souls. But this one knew rage. He knew grief. And when the time came, he chose to fight for the one who had none left. The farmhouse sat crookedly on a stretch of land that seemed forgotten by time. Paint peeled in long ribbons from the siding. The porch steps sagged under their own weight, and the wind moved through the broken slats like it had a secret to tell. No one came down the long gravel road unless they meant to. Most of the town, a scattering of old-timers and tired families, didn't think much of the Marin place. Just another worn-out house on the edge of nowhere, swallowed up by fields and stories. But for 8-year-old Isla Marin, this place was the whole world. She had small feet that barely made a sound on the hardwood floors, and eyes too large for her round, pale face. Her hair was the color of dusk, always tangled, often unwashed. Her shoulders curled inward as if trying to disappear. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her voice was careful, like someone who had learned early that the wrong words could be dangerous. 3 years had passed since Isla's mother died. Pneumonia, the doctor said, fast and cruel. Her father, Victor Marin, had unraveled slowly after that. He cried in his room when he thought Isla couldn't hear him. Then he stopped crying altogether. 2 months later, he married Marla. Marla was not cruel at first. She was quiet, pretty in the way that made other women roll their eyes. Her smiles were tight and calculated, and she moved like someone who'd never tripped in her life. She brought her own furniture when she moved in. Sleek, white, modern pieces that clashed violently with the farmhouse's age. She didn't like the creaky floorboards or the cold wind that came through the windows in winter. But most of all, she didn't like Isla. At first, it was little things. A roll of the eyes, a sigh when Isla spoke. Then came the sharp comments, the chores that piled up, the punishments that stretched just long enough to leave a mark on the girl's spirit. Victor never saw it. He was too busy trying to rebuild his business, too guilt-ridden to notice what was happening inside his own home. He believed Marla when she said Isla was moody or acting out. He believed her when she said Isla needed more discipline. He believed her because it was easier than facing the truth. The only place Isla felt safe was the barn. It stood far from the house, down a dirt path lined with pine trees that whispered secrets in the wind. Inside the barn, dust danced in beams of sunlight, and the scent of hay clung to everything. And in the largest stall stood Shadow. Shadow had once been a champion, a black stallion with fire in his eyes and a gallop that made crowds hold their breath. But now, older and retired, he lived out his days in the quiet barn, mostly forgotten by everyone except Isla. She came to him every day, sometimes with apples, sometimes with just her stories. She told him things she couldn't say to anyone else, about the way Marla looked at her, about the ache in her hands from scrubbing floors, about how she missed her mother. And Shadow listened. He would lower his head when she cried, nudge her shoulder gently, or simply stand still as she leaned against him. Isla believed he understood, not just her words, but her feelings. There was a strength in him, something ancient and deep. And though he never made a sound, he made her feel less alone. But one day, something changed. It started with a missed chore. Isla had been too tired to dust the parlor after cleaning the chicken coop and hauling water. Marla noticed. She always did. That night, there was no dinner for Isla, just a locked door and silence. Isla crept out to the barn in the dark, her stomach empty, her body trembling. She sank into the straw beside Shadow, tears streaking her face. "You're the only one who cares," she whispered. Shadow let out a long breath, his nostrils flaring. Outside the barn, under a pale moon, Marla watched. Her lips curled into a scowl. She marched toward the barn, her heels crunching on the gravel. What happened next would change everything. When Marla flung the barn doors open and yanked Isla by the arm, Shadow reared up with a cry that split the night. His hooves struck the ground inches from Marla's feet. She screamed and stumbled back, fleeing into the darkness. Isla stared at the great black horse, her heart pounding. Shadow stepped forward, placing himself between the girl and her stepmother, his body coiled with warning. That night, Isla slept in the barn, curled beside her protector. But the danger wasn't over. The next day, Marla made a call. She told the vet the horse had attacked her. She demanded he be put down. Isla heard it all through her locked bedroom door. And Shadow waited. As the hours dragged on, Isla watched the shadows shift across her small room. She pressed her ear to the door, listening for movement. The clink. The clink of a glass. The creak of the floorboards. Marla's voice, muttering, bitter, rehearsing her story. When the house fell quiet, Isla moved. Barefoot, she tiptoed through the hallway and down the stairs. The front door was locked, but the kitchen window wasn't. She climbed out into the cool evening air and ran, weeds brushing her ankles, gravel digging into her heels. The barn door groaned open. Shadow turned to face her, ears twitching. "They're coming for you," she choked out, wrapping her arms around his neck. "They're going to take you away." He snorted softly, lowering his massive head to her shoulder. And then came the voice. "I told you to stay away." Marla stood in the doorway, face twisted with rage, her hand raised. In a heartbeat, Shadow reared. The movement was explosive, hooves high in the air, mane flying. Boards crashed to the ground beside Marla, who screamed and fell. The sound echoed through the night, and this time someone heard. Mrs. Bram, the neighbor who'd once gifted Isla a used winter coat, was watering her late tomatoes when the scream cut through the quiet. She saw the girl, the horse, the woman on the ground. She called the police. Within the hour, red and blue lights spun across the gravel road. Officers stepped carefully into the barn. A medic checked Marla. Dr. Salvi, the town's quiet social worker, knelt beside Isla. "Can you tell me what happened?" And for the first time, Isla found her voice. "He protected me," she said. "Shadow protected me." The story spilled out. The bruises, the silence, the nights in the barn. Victor returned 3 days later, summoned from a livestock convention 2 states away. He arrived with a duffel bag and the look of a man who knew he had failed. He cried on the porch as Isla stood silently beside Shadow. And when he knelt and asked for her forgiveness, she didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. Marla was charged with child endangerment. She never came back. The vet never returned either. Instead, news spread. The papers called Shadow a hero, the guardian horse. Kids at school stopped whispering. Teachers gave Isla extra time, and Mrs. Bram baked her a pie. Shadow grew old, slower each year, his mane streaked with silver. But Isla visited him every day. When she graduated top of her class, she wore boots under her gown and stood beside the stallion for a photo. She whispered, "Thank you," and kissed his forehead. He didn't speak. But he didn't need to. Some heroes don't wear capes. Some ride on 4 hooves, silently watching, waiting, until the moment they are needed most. They thought it was over. that a single scream in the dark and the pounding of hooves had brought justice. But cruelty doesn't die quietly, and heroes don't rest when the world is watching. It had been 4 days since the incident in the barn. The police had come and gone. Marla had been taken away in the back of a cruiser, her eyes wild with fury and denial. Isla had barely spoken since. Victor, guilt tangled in every breath he took, had tried to bridge the silence with warm meals and apologies. But healing wasn't a straight road, and trust wasn't something you could serve with breakfast. Shadow remained the same. Silent, solid, present. His presence grounded Isla, even as everything around her shifted like sand. Reporters had begun circling the edge of the property. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was staged. Some hinted that horses don't protect children. They just react. But Isla knew better. Shadow didn't react. He decided. One morning, just as the fog was lifting from the fields, Isla found her father standing by the barn with a local news crew. A woman with too bright lipstick and a white blazer was smiling at the camera. Victor glanced back, caught between pride and guilt. "They just want to hear the story," he said. Isla didn't respond. She turned and walked into the barn. Shadow stood waiting. "They don't understand," she whispered, brushing his coat. "They never will." Victor tried to do right by Isla now. He stopped traveling, picked her up from school, made lunches, folded laundry. But something hung in the air between them. Years of not seeing, of not asking, of not protecting. Marla's trial was scheduled for the fall. Until then, she was out on bail, staying in a small apartment above the hardware store 2 towns over. Isla overheard the officers mention it. She saw the tension in her father's jaw whenever her name was brought up. The town split down the middle. Some people believed Isla. Others whispered she had overreacted. Some still called her the girl with the horse, as if her truth was just another headline. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Shadow had changed. Not in body. He was still aging, still moved slower than he used to. But in behavior. He had become alert, watchful. Sometimes in the early morning, Isla would find him pacing, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the tree line. He was waiting for something, or someone. Then one night, it came. A sound, not loud, not violent, a click of the gate, a figure in the dark. Isla watched from her bedroom window as a shadow moved across the yard. The barn doors creaked. She didn't hesitate. She pulled on her boots and slipped into the night. Inside the barn, she saw her worst fear realized. Marla, standing near Shadow's stall, holding a length of rope. "I'm taking what I paid for," she hissed. "That horse is worth more than anything left on this rotting farm." Isla froze. Shadow didn't. With a roar that seemed to rise from the bones of the earth, he reared up, slamming his hooves against the wood. Marla screamed and fell backward, scrambling toward the door. This time, Isla didn't watch. She moved. She grabbed the lantern off the wall and stepped between Marla and Shadow. Her voice was firm, clear. "You don't belong here." Marla's eyes widened. "You think he's yours now? You're just a stupid little girl. You think anyone cares what you say?" "I do," Isla said. "And I'm not afraid of you anymore." Shadow stepped beside her. Together they stood, a girl and her horse. And Marla saw it then. The truth. The thing she couldn't fight. Not fear, not pity, but power. The kind you only earn when you've been through fire and come out stronger. She fled. Victor and the sheriff arrived minutes later. This time, there were no questions. Marla's bail was revoked. She wouldn't get another chance. but Isla had. And this time, she wasn't wasting it. The storm didn't leave a mess of fallen branches or shattered windows. It left silence, the kind that makes your ears ring, the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Marla was gone, this time for good, but her shadow lingered. The court date was fast-tracked. The DA didn't waste time. Marla's bail violation made things easier. She'd broken into a private residence, threatened a child, trespassed with intent. Her smug confidence shattered in front of the judge. Isla didn't have to testify. The sheriff's body cam footage and the barn security camera Victor had quietly installed after the first incident spoke volumes. It should have felt like a victory. It didn't. Isla still woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Sometimes she dreamed of shadow rearing, hooves striking the sky. Sometimes it was Marla's voice hissing in the dark. Sometimes it was her mother, standing at the edge of the field, saying nothing at all. Victor tried. He really did. He made waffles every Sunday. He started reading again. Novels he used to read aloud when Isla was little. He bought her a bike, tried to plan a vacation, but Isla kept one foot in the barn, one eye on Shadow. She didn't trust normal yet. One day, Dr. Salvi came by. Not with a clipboard, not with a sympathetic smile, but with a bag of carrots and a pair of worn boots. She asked Isla if she could help muck stalls. Isla nodded. They didn't talk much that first visit, but the silence was easy, honest. By the third visit, Isla found herself telling stories about her mother, how she used to braid her hair, how she danced in the kitchen while soup simmered on the stove. Dr. Salvi listened, her hands never stopping. "She sounds like she was fierce," she said. "She was," Isla answered, "but soft too." Shadow snorted softly, ears flicking. The town began to shift. The same neighbors who'd once looked away started waving at the mailbox. A boy from school, who used to call her Weird Horse Girl, left a drawing of Shadow in her locker. Kids whispered less and asked more. The barn became more than a hiding place. It became a space of return. Victor offered to repair it. New siding, fresh paint, a real tack room. Isla agreed, but only if Shadow's stall stayed exactly the same. Not bigger, not newer, just his. That fall, the school counselor asked Isla if she'd be open to a class visit, to tell her story. She said no. Then 2 weeks later, she changed her mind. The classroom was too warm. The desks were too close. But when she stood in front of the whiteboard, something settled in her chest. "I didn't know how to ask for help," she said. "So I stopped talking." But someone listened anyway. She pulled out a photo. Shadow. Standing tall, ears alert, Isla's hand on his mane. "This is Shadow. He saved me before anyone else did." No one spoke for a long moment. Then a girl in the back raised her hand. "I have a dog that sleeps next to me when I cry." Another hand. "My cat scratched my stepdad when he yelled at me once." A third. "Animals just know." That night, Isla told Shadow everything. And when she laid her head against his side, she felt something deep in her chest crack open. Not pain, not grief, but space. For breath. For tomorrow. For a life that was hers again. Fall bled into winter, and with it came silence. The good kind this time. No yelling, no dread. Just cold mornings and the steady rhythm of chores. Victor was different. Less distracted. He still made mistakes. He forgot to pack Isla's lunch twice and left the chicken coop open once. But now, when he messed up, he owned it. He listened. He learned. They started rebuilding together. The barn got new siding, Not perfect, but strong. Isla picked out the paint, a soft gray with deep green trim. Victor fixed the creaky stall doors. Isla cleaned and organized the tack room, and Shadow got a new nameplate for his stall, engraved brass, bold letters, The Guardian. Isla started riding again, not for escape, but for connection. At first, just short walks through the pasture, then longer rides into the woods. With each outing, she grew steadier in the saddle, taller in her seat. Shadow, older but still proud, moved with grace. Slower now, but thoughtful. His steps careful, purposeful. They matched Isla's pace, like they always had. One weekend, Victor surprised her with a trailer and a weathered but sturdy saddle. "Not new," he said, "but it's yours." She hugged him for the first time in years. At school, things kept shifting. Kids still whispered, but now it was mostly curiosity. Isla was invited to sit with new groups. Teachers smiled when she spoke. One even asked her to help start a kindness club. "I don't know what to say to people," Isla said. "You already said the hardest thing," the teacher replied. "The rest is just practice." Dr. Salvi kept visiting the barn. Sometimes she brought tea, sometimes just herself. One afternoon, she brought a clipboard again. "I was thinking," she said, "about starting an animal-assisted therapy program. Not big, just local kids, just horses." Isla stared at her. "With Shadow? If he's willing." He was. The first group came on a cloudy Saturday. 3 kids from a nearby shelter, one from Isla's school. Nervous, withdrawn, but they watched Shadow the way Isla once had. Like he was more than an animal. Like he could see them. And somehow, he always knew which kid needed him most. By spring, the barn had a rhythm again. Not the old rhythm. A better one. Victor helped build benches near the paddock. Isla started journaling. The therapy program grew. Shadow had a new blanket. The fields bloomed with wildflowers. There were still hard days. Grief didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became part of the rhythm too. One morning, Isla found a tiny bird on the barn floor, too young to fly, barely breathing. She cupped it in her hands and sat with Shadow, whispering to the bird like she used to whisper to him. It didn't survive. She buried it near the edge of the field. Shadow stood beside her, head bowed. "We couldn't save it," she said, "but we tried." And that, she realized, was enough. Trying, staying, showing up. That night, Victor made her favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup. They ate on the porch in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. The sky was clear. Isla reached for her father's hand. He held it gently, not perfect, but mending. The summer after Isla turned 12 began with a storm. Not thunder or lightning, but a moment, a quiet moment, that shook the ground beneath her, just the same. Shadow was lying down when she came into the barn. Not asleep, not resting, just down. He looked up at her, calm, unafraid. But something in his eyes told her this was different. She sank to her knees beside him. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here." Victor called Dr. Brighton, the new vet. He arrived fast, his old truck rattling like it barely held together. After an exam and a long silence, he pulled Isla and Victor aside. "He's not in pain," the vet said gently, "but he's tired. Horses know when it's time. They slow down, they lie down, and if they feel safe, they let go." Victor nodded. Isla didn't. She sat in the stall for hours, feeding Shadow slices of apple, brushing his coat, humming old lullabies her mother used to sing. She didn't cry. Not then. "I'm not ready," she said softly. "I still need you." And for 3 more days, Shadow held on. long enough for the therapy kids to visit one more time. Long enough for Mrs. Bram to bring his favorite molasses cookies. Long enough for Isla to fall asleep, curled against his side, her fingers in his mane. Then, on the fourth morning, he was gone. He passed in his sleep, peaceful, still. Victor found her there, still curled beside him, tears soaking her shirt. They buried him at the edge of the pasture, under the old willow. The therapy kids painted a wooden sign, "Guardian of the Broken." The barn felt impossibly empty after that, the silence louder than before. But Shadow's story didn't end with him. Dr. Salvi's therapy program expanded. More horses, more kids. Isla helped train them. She learned to ride again on a younger mare named Comet, nervous at first, but steady with time. She turned 13, then 14, graduated middle school, started high school. Her world got bigger, but the barn remained her anchor. One fall, she was invited to speak at a regional conference on youth mental health. She stood behind a wooden podium, photos of Shadow flickering on the screen behind her. "When I couldn't speak, he listened," she told them. "When I couldn't run, he stood by me. He didn't save me from the world. He stood with me in it." Afterward, dozens of people came up to her, some with tears, some with questions, all with stories of their own. A girl whose dog never left her side after a bad foster home. A boy whose rabbit had sat in his lap through every panic attack. A woman who hadn't spoken about her childhood until today. Shadow lived in all of them now. The program was renamed the Guardian Barn Project. Years later, Isla stood where it all began. Now 17, boots in the dirt, breeze in her hair. Victor came up behind her, older now, but steady. "You okay?" She nodded. "I'm more than okay." Behind them, kids laughed in the paddock. Horses nickered. Volunteers brushed manes, fed hay, mucked stalls. Life moved. She looked out across the pasture, to the willow, to the grave. "I miss him," she said. "I know, but he's still here." Victor smiled. "He always will be." Some heroes don't wear capes. Some don't speak at all. Some carry us through the worst of life, not with words, but with presence, with patience, with loyalty. And when they're gone, we carry them. In the way we love, in the way we protect, in the way we stay. Isla mounted her horse, eyes fixed on the horizon. She wasn't riding away from the past. She was riding toward everything she was meant to become. And the storm behind her, it had cleared.